Dr. Hovind, I love your doctoral thesis. I've torn it to pieces with house and gaffle. I can't remember when I last pissed myself laughing. It's a good thing the thesis mopped the piss off the floor.
Welcome to part 14 of this read-through and peer review of Kent Hovind's doctoral dissertation, which was published on wikileaks.org on December the 9th, 2009. If you have not yet seen the previous parts of this series, then I recommend that you go back and see those first, as this episode will start off exactly where we left off in the last. In the last episode, Kent generally cocked up his summation of the Eastern religions. We left him with Buddhism, and that's where we pick up now. Kent continues, "There is no mention in Buddhism of the original creation." That's right, Kent, there isn't. And that shows a very deep misunderstanding of what Buddhism is actually all about. Kent goes on, "The fifth major Eastern religion that began in that time period was Taoism, founded by Lao Tzu. He lived from 604 to 517 BC. This religion was a rival of Confucianism in China." Kent then launches into a quote. "Taoism ... was also an evolutionary religion, built around the concept of the way. Open brackets, the long war against God, page 221, close brackets." That looks like a reference. It's got a title and a page number, but no author. Oh, so close, Kent. So close. It was basically pantheistic in philosophy. Taoism teaches that nature is bipolar. All of nature is divided into yin and yang. Yin is represented by water on the one end, and yang is represented by fire at the other end. Well, with the exception of the odd quote in the middle, that paragraph is largely correct. The five major Eastern religions that developed during this time were Hinduism, Confucianism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. At this point, Kent picks up his banana, because we have an absolute belter coming. Kent continues, "Because of the atheistic and pantheistic philosophies of these religions and the lack of importance placed on God, the entrance of communism into these countries was very simple." Now, Kent, let me just point something out. India, which is where Hinduism is and where Buddhism came from, is largely one of the most democratic countries in the world. In fact, it's been democratic ever since the fall of the Raj, when it was governed by the British Empire. Iran, where Zoroastrianism comes from, is presently a theocracy, but before that, that was also a democracy. China, on the other hand, was a feudal empire. In common with many countries that later adopted communism, China had a very wealthy ruling elite and a very, very poor peasant class with very little in between. If the viewer wishes to look into the origins of communism, they will find that it has very, very little to do with religion whatsoever. But Kent continues, "When the evolutionary doctrine was taught in these countries, the people did not have to change their religion in order to include it." Actually, Kent, I think what you'll find is that it's more the other way around. With the introduction of communism, communism found that in these particular countries, it didn't have to exclude the local religion. unlike in Russia, where it had to suppress the Russian Orthodox Church. In communism, it is generally held that all members of society have to submit to the will of the state. Any religion that teaches that there is a higher power than the state, well, that just gets in the way, and in communism it has to go. However, in the Eastern religions, where they promote more of a philosophy and a way of life, these do not conflict with the will of the state, the will of the people, and therefore they survive and are compatible with communism. Kent acknowledges this in the next line. Evolution and communism blended in fine with the Eastern religions. In about 1895, a man named Yen Fu translated Thomas Huxley's book into Chinese. And which book would that be, Kent? Lessons in Elementary Physiology? If you type Thomas H. Huxley into the search engine on Amazon, you get 1,600 results. This is your doctoral dissertation, Kent. You really do, and I mean you really do, have to be more specific. Kent continues. That was probably the turning point in China. It led the way for communism to take over so many of the Oriental countries. Yes, Kent, that and extreme oppression by the ruling elite on the peasant classes. That'll do it every time. At the time of Christ, it was almost universally accepted as scientific fact that the world was infinitely old. The two philosophies mentioned above were very prevalent during the development of the early church. Which philosophies, Kent? Can you be a little more specific? You've discussed so many. These are the philosophies that were referred to in Colossians 2:8, where the Bible says,
"Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceits."
As the Apostle Paul was preaching on Mars Hill, he began his sermon by talking about the infinite Creator, the God that made the worlds.
Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill, and said, Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you, God that made the world, and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands.
Acts 17:22 through to 24. This, Kent says, immediately got the people's attention. Yes, Kent, I bet it did. And I wonder how many of them were thinking, well, if you don't build a temple with your hands, what do you build it with? Furthermore, in light of that verse, it also begs the question, why build and therefore why go to church? Because, according to that verse, God isn't going to be there. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Having told us all about the history of evolution, in the next video, Kent goes on to tell us what we need to do about it.